Welcome to another episode of Thrive Again, your relationship podcast. It's Michael here. I have my beautiful wife, Amy, right next to me. How are you, love?
I'm great, thank you. It's actually a bit hot today. It's a bit steamy in the shed. We're set up in the shed, but it's our little office space that we have.
Only steamy because it's spring, not anything else. So, we haven't ventured to the shed. So, just wanted to open up a conversation today that is very powerful in that a lot of people can't access this, they're blocked from it, and it prevents them from having a deep, connected, fulfilling relationship. And we're going to speak into that in a sec. But really just wanted to thank you guys for turning up as you do to listen to these episodes for your own relationship health, and making sure that your relationship is moving in the right direction, because if you're not doing any work on this stuff, then you're going backwards. And that's the truth. There's a danger that we can just dwell in stagnancy. And stagnancy can occur because of so many different reasons. But I know for us, it's the day-to-day things that we just get swept up in, our roles and the kids and stresses and money and outside influences and friends and addictions and all this stuff. It just gets in the way, and it takes a real concerted approach to avoid stagnation, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's our main purpose of sharing this podcast, is to share some inspiration, some motivation to couples to, not stagnate and to look at their relationship and face some of the challenges that might come up. Because what's the purpose of being in a relationship or of living without growth and fulfillment and joy and fun and having that thriving connection? So I think it's super important.
I love it. So let's get into what we're talking about before we ramble on too much. But today we wanted to speak about maybe some of the reasons initially why we don't have a connection with our partner that's at the level of thriving, because that's what we aspire our couples to get to. We don't muck around too much. We don't want mediocrity in our relationships, and we do our damn best to make sure that we're pulling apart all the moving parts that happen internally within the relationship. Well, of course, all of the attachment styles and the love languages and the values and the visions and all that stuff too, but we need to move towards the painful parts. And sometimes that's really difficult, isn't it? It's difficult.
Yeah, no one likes pain, which is okay, but the thing is that if we keep avoiding the pain, and if we don't actually open up and face it, move towards it, then you will be stuck, and it will be pretty boring and non fulfilling.
And a drawn out process too, and it ends up just drawing out to this point where you're 15 to 20 years into the relationship, you're kind of living your own lives, you feel like you don't even know that other person anymore to a level of depth. Maybe you don't feel like you can be vulnerable with them and you can open up anymore because maybe some trust has been ruptured, or maybe you just don't feel safe to share with them, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what's happening in your world. And so you look outside of the relationship to fulfill those needs, and that's where the danger happens.
It is. And then all sorts of bad habits get in play, like we can see addictions play out, we can see cheating, abusive behavior. It can lead to all sorts of problems that we can avoid if we tackle the issue earlier, and if we look towards it as opposed to running away and escaping the pain of it, which are pretty good. I think you and I have done it. We've done it before. It's easier to be quiet, not say anything, go into our little corners and pretend that we're a happy little family. But it didn't serve us. It didn't really get us to this place, that's for sure.
What got us to this place was facing towards the pain and the issues that we might have been internalizing, but bringing them to the external. You know, actually finding the courage to speak up about our problems that we're experiencing in the relationship from my perspective, and you having the maturity to receive that open-heartedly and to be able to process that in a way that's not critical of yourself. It's like, hey, what are we doing here? Like, we're a partnership. We're a partnership. So it's not me versus you, even though it was for a while. It was really me versus you. And, you know, I contributed to that in so many ways as well. So
yeah. It's a total shift, and that's what we're going to speak on today, because it was scary and it was hard, and I think that the topic that I'm just going to drop it down now is vulnerability. You know, like, this is what we need in a relationship that is thriving. We need to have vulnerability, and I'm going to ask you guys to feel into that word. Because when I do that, I took a moment before we started recording, and I was like, oh gosh, vulnerability makes my body want to contract. It makes all my like insides go, oh, like no, like you want to hide, because that's what we've probably been taught and shown, and potentially the belief that we've created on the term be vulnerable, you know, and I feel like that's a real hindrance to our relationship, is all of those misconceptions about really potentially what vulnerability means in a relationship.
Yeah, I want you to tune into that now. Why was that making you go all like that when you were saying vulnerability?
Scary.
What's happening?
It's scary. Like, I feel like I don't know where it's come from, but I feel that if someone is to ask me to be vulnerable, to be truthful, then I feel that there's a part of me that wants to put up a mask, that wants to hide and think that I can't be true because that's not my authentic self.
So what if you were to be totally truthful? What happens then? That thought ruminates in you and moves to an emotion of like, oh, if I actually expose the real truth of how I'm feeling right now, that I don't know, like I might be judged. Is that one thing?
Yeah, I get fearful. I get fearful that it might, the fear of judgment. Maybe my emotions or my thoughts aren't worthy of being heard. Maybe they're completely off track and they're not normal. I don't know, like what is normal?
You're not normal.
Yeah, I'm not normal.
Jeez, you're so abnormal.
Maybe I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, all these things come up. You know, I think we've been practicing a lot more vulnerability between the two of us more recently, which allows that to kind of overflow to more vulnerability with the kids and being real and raw with them and not pretending to have a shit all together, because sometimes I am tired and exhausted and cranky, and I can't have this mask that I've got it all under control, because sometimes I don't.
Yes.
So there's so much layers to that depth of why I feel that vulnerability is such a big deal.
Because there's so many reasons, and for me there is too, of course. And for a bloke to be vulnerable to his partner, I guess to me, if I'm vulnerable to you, I just transport myself back to maybe where we first met. If I was vulnerable to you to the level where I'm vulnerable with you now, if I was back then, I would perceive that I would be weak if I did that. So I would be worried that you would think that I'm weak and non-masculine and quite feminine. And, you know, like, where does that come from? You know, where does that come from? And the answers that are coming to me now are society, maybe my upbringing, you know, maybe influences from my family. And, you know, we're told to protect that part of ourselves. We want to project a beautiful reality of ourselves. Look on social media, everyone has a beautiful life, don't they? Jeez, they go on some cracking holidays and they're always smiling.
If only you knew what was really going on.
Yeah, and as relationship coaches, we get to see this too, you know, that the images that you see are not the truth, you know, and it feeds into our lack of self-worth, which we all have. We all have a feeling of inadequacy at some degree.
So I'd love to know, what's the meaning of vulnerability to you? What does it mean to be vulnerable?
for me, the meaning of vulnerability is to express or open up the deeper parts of my truth without any fabrication. Yeah, so it's really being able to open up to a depth that normally we don't go to because we just sit on the surface. Because we don't have time, we don't have trust in the other person. There are so many different barriers to why this happens, but yeah, that's what I put it down to.
And do you realise that actually, from a female's point of view, how attractive that is for a man to be vulnerable with their partner?
I think I do now. But back then I would never, ever have believed that, and I wouldn't have had the courage to even peer into that realm at all. Because again, I'm trying to preserve an identity, because I felt that by being perfect, that I would be loved.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so to be perfect, you had to put on a lot of different masks and hide the truth. Was that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. It was a beautiful mechanism I'd created, and it served me well in the short term, but in the long term, I'd contrived up an avatar or an identity that I now had to uphold as me. And it takes energy. It takes a lot of energy to do that, and it also disconnects myself from me.
And which is the opposite of vulnerability, right?
Yeah,
It's a complete opposite. Interesting, isn't it?
yeah, it sure is.
So I'm curious to know then, what are some ways, if you know, what are some of the benefits of being vulnerable in a relationship? What do we see, or what do you think is important to share with our listeners of why should partners be vulnerable together?
Well, they should aspire to be more vulnerable with each other, because if we do that, we create a bubble between the two of us where we can trust and we can resolve issues internally without having to go outside of the relationship. And when I say outside of the relationship, I know that in, maybe, 15 years ago, I might have just gone out with a few mates and we'd have a few beers and we'd all whinge about our partners to each other. And then we'd talk about footy and all the other stuff. But, all of a sudden, in order to get reprieve from a situation that I had within the relationship, I needed to go out of the relationship. And that was literally just a pressure valve release. It was not resolving anything. It was a pressure valve release, and we would meet whenever, once a month, once a fortnight. And then I'd come back to the relationship. I'd maybe feel some pressure has been released, but at the same time, the fundamental factors that are contributing to the disconnect between me and you was still there. So nothing's changed. So by being vulnerable, we're opening up to our deep desires, our needs, our wants, the things that we that I personally, individually need right now to flourish. And I'm putting it out there on the line to let you know, firstly, this is how I'm feeling, and maybe you hurt me in this way. And maybe even I'll experience that hurt while sharing. But through that expression, you see my pain. So you see me. And if you do the same, or now that that's happened, that interaction, you may feel safer to do the same. And if you feel safe enough to express and share your pain to me, then do I have the maturity to hold that space for you and reciprocate?
Yeah, it's a good point you brought into about safety, So if you're, listening and you're thinking, there's no way I can be vulnerable with my partner, ask yourself, is it because you don't feel safe? I think that's a pretty good question. Ask yourself, is it because, what is it? What's stopping you from feeling vulnerable? And sometimes there are red flags in a relationship that really need to be explored, because ultimately you want to, our goal as relationship coaches with the people we work with is to have a thriving relationship which is open and vulnerable and expressing your truest desires, your deepest needs, your biggest fears, because sometimes it's the fear of actually opening up that stops that connection and that deep understanding of each other. So yeah, that is something. It's really important in any relationships, but particularly in the ones that we work with, is to ask yourself those questions. Can I be vulnerable? Can I open up and express? And if I can't, then why? What is it?
Yeah, and I don't know, but from a female's perspective, I know a lot of relationships and people that we know where you would, like, if you were in her shoes and you look at him and his level of emotional maturity and his ability to communicate and to actively listen, you can just see that a lot of those parts are just not there. And so you can see why she can't open up to him, especially if he acts in a way that is looking to solve or fix your problem. So that's also another dynamic that's an issue that we need to kind of go over as well, is that, I mean, if your man's kind of continually sort of saying, well, because he doesn't want you to be upset, he doesn't want you to be sad. And so if you're welling up with tears and saying that, oh no, wipe your tears away. You shouldn't be like that. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try meditation? You should, speak to Davo's wife. Like, she's keen to meet up with someone. And all of a sudden it's the fixing mind comes in. So yeah, it's a good idea to reflect on these topics to see where the barrier is for you to open up more. Is it trust? Like, are you not able to trust your partner?
Yeah. That's a big one, because I don't believe that you can be vulnerable without trust, or with being, feeling like you're in a trustworthy relationship.
Yeah.
Because then there's another dynamic in play that needs to be explored, right? Trust is the core of any deep relationship.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be the big stuff. It's trust in that, if I express or open up to you, are you going to be open to receiving it? And if not, then I'll go elsewhere, or I'll just internalize it and I'll ultimately get unwell because I'm maybe then feeling anxiety, maybe depression or depressive states, and then the list goes on with all the health concerns that might happen from suppressing our emotional needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love for you to share, or maybe we can both share, on what it's done for our relationship to be able to have more vulnerability and trust, deep trust.
Well, it makes me look forward to cups of tea with you on the couch, on the balcony. Yeah. No, it does actually, and that's actually really special to me. There's nothing more that I love actually in life than sitting on the balcony with you and just speaking up about what my current challenge is or what I'm going through. And sometimes we go pretty deep with this stuff, and other times it's just really practical things like, man, I just really I've been feeling flat the last few days, and I don't know why, and I've got this feeling in my chest, and that's all I can say to you. But by doing that, then you're like, oh, that's really interesting, and then you start to maybe unpack or ask questions, and maybe that's the benefit of being coaches, but you then ask me questions as to, like, well, let's dive into this. Like, I wonder where that comes from. And by speaking about my issues and where I'm at currently this week and the stresses that I'm internalizing, probably because that's how I process information, by speaking outward about it, we find that we resolve that dilemma or that internal struggle. So we can resolve our individual issues together.
Yeah, and it lightens everything so much, doesn't it? And it strengthens the bond so deeply. Like, the more vulnerable you can be with your partner, the more you can see them and experience their rawness, their emotion, their life through their eyes, and you can hold that space for them. The deeper the connection it is. So you know, obviously something we've been working on for years, but it is so beautiful to be able to have that in a relationship. So it could be baby steps, but it's really important to start the process of opening your heart a little bit more to your partner, letting them see you, letting them in, letting them be able to witness the emotion that you're experiencing, if there is emotion there, even if it's happiness, joy, fun, laughter. It does, you know, whatever color of the emotional spectrum it is, it doesn't matter, but it's important to to be able to have that space for each other. I think it's so beautiful. I feel so grateful that we have that.
Yeah. And you know, we see rapid transformation in this space, don't we? It can take a long time, and I think that, you know, they're baby steps, because we're repaving new neural pathways in this space too, especially if you've communicated in one certain way for your entire life. But we see shifts within a week with couples where we teach them a communication strategy and they embrace it and embody it and actually do the practice, and they're able to hold space for the first time. So now both are able to receive from the other, you know, and it becomes this beautiful, enlivening synergy that starts to emerge, maybe even something that they've never had before, which then leads to all the juicy stuff. You know, it leads to intimacy and physical intimacy, and the desire to want to connect at a physical level as well, and not just connect because it's Saturday morning and this is just what we do. It's like, damn, I want you, you know, like you know, I really need you right now, like, you know, and it's coming from a place of like, man, you know, you're so attractive to me. And there were times in our relationships where I felt like you weren't attractive to me. You weren't attractive to me. And when we get to the bottom of it, it's the dynamic that we're holding in ourselves, and the fact that we're looking outside often in the relationship for other things. But if we can absolutely find it within, especially if you have that foundation together in the first place.
Absolutely. And it takes courage, you know, it does take courage. I feel like it's something that we've probably been maybe shown, or society has taught us that it's not okay to show weakness, or to
especially
be
for the guys.
Yeah, especially for the guys, but also for the girls to some degree, because
Definitely.
You know, I feel like a lot of the females in this era are quite masculine in that space, so they don't drop into their feminine that easily and feel the emotion. They just mask it up with something else or hide it away as well. So yeah, I feel like it's really important to speak and share that it is courage that you need to open a little bit by little bit with your partner, to be able to have that deeper understanding and connection.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that it's not too far-fetched for some couples, and maybe it is, maybe it feels that way, and if it does, then make sure you reach out to us, and we'd love to hear from you, because, you know, often you don't see the potential, but we do, and we like to, you know, unravel that for you, and to let you know from the exterior what we see, and through our experience we're hopefully able to help with that. But,
we've got an amazing opportunity to open up to more vulnerability and trust with our upcoming retreats. I think it won't be far off the time that this goes live, but you know, the retreat is a perfect spot to be held and have that safe space to know that it's perfectly fine and amazing if you can be more vulnerable with your partner. So
we help each other to meet each other where you're at right now, rather than want or desire your partner to be a certain way. This retreat helps you to see each other again, you know, to really see, experience and understand each other from each other's reality, you know, because we get shut down into our own reality, and that's normally a symptom of just being in fight or flight, just being in survival mode, and yeah, it takes supporting each other, being vulnerable, being able to trust each other. I got your back, you know.
Yeah, the retreat's going to be amazing. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. So if you are interested, there's a couple of spots still left. It's from the 13th to the 15th of October. There is some details we can pop in the show notes. If you are interested, please reach out, and we'll share a bit more about what to expect on that beautiful weekend away together. But for listeners out there, I encourage you, I try and challenge you to be more vulnerable with your partner, because it's worth it.
Beautifully said. Thanks again, listeners. It's been nice to connect with you again, and we will catch you on the next podcast.
Thanks, guys.